Isn't this amazing that God even works through our character flaws, our racism and our antagonism towards our brothers for our own good?
Stay there for a second. Welcome back to The Move, where we are vibing with the book 10 minutes at a time.
The next 10 minutes are on Romans 11, verses 24 to 36.
24 through 36. I'm excited about these.
You are very excited.
I am, because they're just so good. They conclude such a good portion. But before we get there, we got to ask them a question.
It's a good question. Did you read it?
Have you read it?
Have you read it? My bad.
No, whatever. Did you read it? Works. Nah, ain't no failures, man.
I just watched the episode where we're debating the intro.
Yeah.
And seeing like, is it vibing in the book, through the book, with the book?
What did we decide?
We didn't know. We set out to do a poll. So people have voted by now.
All right.
And through the magic of the internet,
we will know.
We know, but we don't know.
So our past selves know, or our future selves know?
Our future selves know.
In the past. Anyway, listen, go read the passage. We're about to start.
3, 2, 1, let's go.
So we begin with verse 24 again.
Yeah, it's interesting that we wanted to go over that section of it again, talking about the branches that could be grafted back in. And there's the heart of God, right?
Yeah.
The heart of God is always for us, never against us. This is something that we teach a lot. This is something that we preach a lot, that we believe full-hearted, right?
Yeah.
It's that God is not there to just... Sometimes we have the picture of God, that God's on the elevator, and you're running to the elevator with your kids in one hand, your suitcase in the other hand, and God's right there smashing the door close button. That's not God. God is not willing that any should perish, right? He's patient, wanting all to come to repentance. And we see that even in this text.
So then, using that elevator analogy, I have a question.
What's the question?
Is the nation inside the elevator or outside the elevator?
That's the question.
It is, isn't it?
What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it depends how the analogy goes, right? Because we could do the analogy where they're in the elevator. It's just that in their minds, the elevator...
They think they're outside because they feel as though God's not with them, but God's heart is so for them that they might still be in it.
I don't know, because they feel like God is actually for them, and the Christians are outside because they perverted what the nation is.
So in this analogy, and we're just going deep on this, but they think they're inside, but they might be outside.
Yeah. So maybe we just throw the analogy out altogether.
Let's just go with what he says.
Yeah, he says a partial hardening has come upon Israel. Actually, let me go back. Verse 25. Lest you be wise in your own sight, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery. I love how he calls it a mystery. Brothers, a partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles.
In what sense is the hardening of the hearts, or at least the partial hardening, a mystery?
In that the hardening is not towards the end of what you and I think it is.
We think hardening is that God is consistently distancing himself from these people out of frustration, out of anger even, just because they're consistently stiff-necked.
And so that as he's leaving them, he's looking for somebody else, right? And the Gentiles.
But what we're seeing is quite different, that the hardening is not a complete and full and final hardening, but it's a partial hardening.
And it's a partial hardening because of... to the end of what verse 26 says. And in this way, all Israel will be saved.
So hold on. Through the process of hardening hearts, God saves us. What?
This is, yes. This is so good, because what's going on here is that he's given them the covenants. The nation of Israel receives the covenants. They're the children of Abraham. Out of them comes the Messiah. And through Messiah, God actually reconciles himself to the whole world. Right?
The problem is that the Jews don't like that picture. They don't like the answer to it. Then the Gentiles are like, oh, that's dope. Let me take it. How do the Jews feel about that?
Well, it seems as though they're not too happy. They're not too pleased, right?
And previous verses talk about them being jealous.
Yes. And Paul says he plays a particular role. He's the apostle to the Gentiles, right? Including the Gentiles in, and he's including the Gentiles in a way that the Jews don't appreciate, because he's including them in, and he's saying, oh, nah, you don't have to get circumcised.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They're like, hold on. if you said that they could be part of us, but they have to play by our rules, because that was a framework that they understood all the way back in Exodus. If a sojourner in their land, they want to come among you, they got to do all these things, and they can be part of you because they've become Jewish.
And Paul's deal is like, wait, haven't you read your own rules? Because if you read your own rules correctly, you'd understand that this was always the goal, to bring them in, right? But since you didn't want to do it, God has done it through Messiah. Coincidentally, that was his plan all along. Now he's included them in, and including them in, he's lavishing them with the riches that by nature are actually yours. But in being yours, you were supposed to give it to them because that was his plan. But he's lavishing it on them. And me, Paul, I magnify this ministry in hopes that you might see with a little bit of your hard hearts, look and say, well, I want what they got.
So it's like a father who has a child, but they have an estranged relationship. The child rejects the father in some way, shape, or form. So what does the father do? He goes and he adopts someone and brings them and grafts them into the family and lavishes his goodness on that adopted child. But the problem is that in our parable, in our understanding, the resources of a father are limited. And so in order to give the blessing to the adopted child, the first child, the original child, doesn't quite get the blessing. But God is greater than that in that his blessings are unlimited. So the hope is that God will give the blessings to this adopted child in a way that gets the first child to be jealous and says, man, that's what I want.
Man, I don't know why, but my brain is just firing super hard with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, God. Right which
now.
one?
Thor. And Loki.
Okay.
And what is it? Odin. Right? So you have Loki, who isn't really his natural son.
Right.
He's one of these like ice creatures. I forget what their name is.
Yeah, he's some like hybrid thing.
Yeah, right. But Thor is actually the natural son. And for so long, Loki is the one that aspires to the throne, and he's the one that actually wants to rule. And Thor is just fine being a hero and drinking his big jugs of, Asgardian self-filling beer, right? But there's something that happens that provokes Thor
to step into his actual inheritance.
And to some degree, it's that strained relationship, but also seeing how Loki desires. So I'm saying, in the cinematic universe, it isn't as clear cut as what we're talking about, but you see that framework there again. And you see that framework over and over and over in cinema and movies and all sorts of mediums, this idea of pitting one against the other in order to provoke. But in all of those versions, there's always a limited resourcing, and only one of them can sit in the seat.
Right.
Right.
The difference with God is it's not that way.
No limit of resources,
and
there's enough room for all of us.
Everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
So that brothers need not be pitted against each other.
Yeah.
Jacob does not need to be at war with Esau.
There's a sense that God does pit us against each other, but for our own good, because he knows at the end of the day, I don't actually have to choose between either one. I choose both. Even if in the moment that I can pit you against each other, I can do a partial hardening, but get you to turn around and come back.
Yeah.
That's worth it.
And this pitting against each other that it seems that God is doing, this Paul says that this pitting against each other that God seems to be doing is actually just in response to the way you've responded to his grace. So when Pharaoh responded to God by saying, no, I'm not going to let the people go, God just simply acquiesced to Pharaoh's heart. And in doing that, it was a hardening. Why? Because Pharaoh isn't agreeing with the truth of the thing, right? In the same way, Israel didn't agree with the truth of what God was actually doing.
And it's not even fair to say that all of Israel didn't agree with it, because Paul's there.
Yes.
And that's the whole argument of the prior part of this chapter, is that actually some are agreeing.
Yes.
And that's to God's glory.
Yes.
It's interesting in verse... are we supposed to go to 28? Yeah, we are supposed to go to 28. As regards the gospel, they're enemies for your sake. Yeah. But as regards to election, they're beloved for the sake of their forefathers. Yes. For the gifts and the callings of God are irrevocable.
So the wisdom of God to allow them to be antagonistic towards the Gentiles, and this benefits the Gentiles.
isn't this amazing that God even works through our character flaws, our racism and our antagonism towards our brothers for our own good?
Stay there for a second.
I mean, you think about this. Like the Jews are like, oh, get rid of these Gentiles. They're horrible people. They're pagans. They're blasphemous or whatever the case is. They're not us. And God's like, all right, I see how you're doing that. And I'm going to use that to reach your hard hearts.
So whether it be racism, misogynism, whatever negative ism you can construct, or even if it's as simple as the circumstances of your life, like it is actually true that all things work all things work for good to those who have been called according to his purpose.
That's right.
Right?
That's good.
So that the lens that we look through is a lens that, man, the mystery and the majesty of God is that, yeah, in my personal life, a lesson I can draw. Yeah, I might be down in the dumps right now, and I might feel like I'm being abandoned, or I might feel like I'm suffering tribulation, trial, famine, sword. And yet I know because of the way he works, I have not been cast off. And nothing, absolutely nothing can separate me from the love of God that I have.
Because his callings and his gifts are irrevocable.
So that he still has a heart and loves the people that he selected to be the ones who would steward the promises and the ones from whom Messiah actually comes. They're not cast off.
No.
They're not cast off.
And neither are we, should we find ourselves making those same mistakes.
That's good.
There's still hope for us yet.
Ooh, so he finishes. He finishes and says, oh, the depths of the riches and the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments. How inscrutable his ways.
That's a good word. We'll continue that word 10 minutes at a time tomorrow. See you then.